The first time I flew on a plane, I was 11 years old, which pushed us squarely in 1979. My family was going to Florida because we were that kind of family. And I was with my grandmother, my grandfather, and I was in a window seat on a Delta 727. I remember pressing my face against the glass and staring at the wing, thinking that is this, it's physically impossible, right? Like, there's a lot of people on this plane. It is really big. No, that wing is way too small. This tube is way too heavy. None of the math works. I'm 11. I don't know math. And can I just tell you, 21, I still didn't know math, and it was still a mystery to me. So, and we started rolling, and the engines did that thing where they go from a hum to like absolute insistence, and then we're off the ground. And I genuinely thought they got away with it. They actually got away with it. We're not going to die.
Were you like William Shatner? You look like
looking out the window.
Something's wrong. This can't be real. So I don't remember the very first time I flew. I don't remember, the first time, because I know that I flew before the first time I remember, but I just don't, I don't remember like where I was going or anything like that. But the first real memory I have is somewhere in the early 80s. I want to say it was like 83 or something like that. Just a kid. And I'd been up in Northern California visiting my aunt and uncle and cousins, summertime and, all that sort of thing. My parents, they decided, well, we're going to drive back, but they left me up there. And then, I was going to stay for another week or whatever. So my aunt puts me on a plane, by myself.
Oh,
I know, as a kid, a little kid,
yeah,
man. I was like 10 or 11 or something like that. Sacramento to Ontario on Air Cal, which doesn't exist anymore, right? It got bought, and I remember the livery though. And do you remember like back in the olden days when your ticket came in like a nice paper sleeve?
Yes.
Yes.
And it was a very complicated ticket. It was like many pages.
Yes,
right?
Yes,
yeah.
Right. Yeah, I remember the livery of the planes, that dark royal purple and the orange and the red, and all the complementary colors, and looked great on the plane, and that paper ticket with the carbon slip behind it. And I remember is walking down the steps, onto the tarmac in Ontario, and my mom standing at the gate when I came out, because back then you could walk all the way to the gate without a ticket. And I was just, I was focused on the peanuts, though.
The peanuts. The peanuts. I was worried about the wing falling off, and you were like focused on the peanuts.
I mean, come on, though. But like, it's, it's a whole bag of peanuts. That's not a little bag of peanuts. I remember as a kid loving airplane peanuts. It's, it's not nothing there.
You were flying alone across California as a child with a paper ticket. Mom's waiting at the gate on the other side, and what you remember is the snack situation. This is honestly one of the most clarifying things you've ever told me about yourself. It's like that you were fascinated by that whole tiny bag.
Well, to be fair, the peanuts were doing a lot of work on that day.
Okay, so today we're talking about one of the most genuinely transformative things humanity has ever built. And I say that with the full awareness that I say things like that on this show somewhat regularly. And I refuse, what is yours? Double entry accounting.
Double entry bookkeeping.
Right.
Yeah.
But I mean, this really is like one of the most transformative things ever. We're talking about passenger jet aviation, the history of how human beings took everything they learned from 2 world wars, from a British inventor nobody would fund for nearly a decade, from a series of disasters that killed people and changed how engineers thought about failure forever, and turned it into the thing where you show up at an airport, take off your shoes for some reason still, get in a metal tube and go to sleep and wake up in another country.
The taking off the shoes thing is maybe, we talk about that in some other episode.
Yeah, okay, fair enough, because I have feelings about that, as I have about most things, right? But today, the jets. The history's wild, the engineering is extraordinary, and the wrong decisions turned out to be the most important as the right ones. So you ready? Let's go.
I boarded last, no room in the overhead bin. Lord, I boarded last, no room in the bin. Walked down to 23 and squeezed squeeze myself in. Man in sea wouldn't lift his knee. No, that man in sea won't lift that knee. Woman in A pulled the shade down. Didn't wanna see. I'm in 23B.
I want to start by painting a picture of what flying actually was before jet engines arrived, because I think most people who've grown up in the jet age have completely lost track of how different the piston era was, and you need that context to understand why the jet engine changed everything. We're talking about the late 1940s into the early 1950s. World War II had ended. Aviation technology exploded during the war years because wartime will do that to a technology sector, and now the commercial airlines are inheriting this enormous base of knowledge and trying to figure out how to run a business with it.
Yeah, the aircraft they had to work with were, pretty impressive for the era. The Lockheed Constellation, oh, I love the Connie. The Douglas DC-6 and the DC-7. These were sophisticated piston engine aircraft with multiple propellers, beautiful machines, technically. I love the
Oh,
I love that movie, The Aviator. I know. I love that movie. Okay, so I don't build model airplanes, but I would totally build like those, the Connie and stuff. I really love those airframes.
Beautiful machines that were absolutely exhausting to fly in. Yes. The Constellation, especially the Connie, which was one of the most gorgeous airplanes ever made from a visual standpoint. That distinctive triple tail fin, that dolphin-shaped fuselage. Howard Hughes was involved in its development, and honestly, it shows because it has the energy of something designed by a person with both genius and unresolved personal issues. Like, it looks like that. But the experience of riding in it, it was not what we would appreciate as pleasant. These aircraft were loud. They flew at lower altitudes than jet aircraft, which meant they flew through weather, not above it. And a rough crossing over the North Atlantic on a Constellation was a genuine physical ordeal. Kind of like being on a bobsled. Yeah.
Yeah. The unpressurized early versions were just, particularly brutal. Later versions were pressurized, which, big improvement, but still at lower cabin pressure than modern aircraft. And the range limitations meant that transatlantic routes had intermediate stops.
Oh, boo. Gander, Newfoundland. The great involuntary layover of the pre-jet area. If you flew from New York to London in the early 1950s, you stopped in Gander, which is a place that exists primarily as a refueling stop and has been doing that job with extraordinary dedication since the war. The town of Gander, Newfoundland was literally built around the airport. The whole community exists because planes had to stop there.
Yeah, and the flight time from New York to London on a Constellation was something like 15 to 18 hours, depending on the winds. Just like, okay, New York to London, we do that so fast now, 15 to 18 hours. Can you imagine? That's rough.
Well, I think it takes me 12. Come on now. Although I don't have to stop in Newfoundland.
Yeah, but you're coming from all the way to the other side.
Halfway around the world.
Yeah.
And we go up and over. Like, we go over the top. We don't go around, right? So 15 to 18 hours, potentially with a stop in Newfoundland.
Hold on. How do you go up and over when the Earth is flat now? Come on.
Right, I'm sorry. We go that way. We go straight.
We go right.
Oh, boy. 15 to 18 hours, potentially with a stop in Newfoundland, is a loud, sometimes turbulent, pressurized, but not very pressurized cabin. And flying was still considered glamorous. People dressed up. You actually ate food with cutlery, like real cutlery, not the spork that I bring. And there was a whole, I did travel with a spork. There's a whole culture around it. And part of that culture was only important people do this. And only when it matters. Flying was not casual. Flying was an event.
I really like the way people dressed up. Yeah.
Right?
Although, sometimes I have dressed up to fly, but, usually because I got to get on to a meeting like right away or something.
Right. I can't do it. I wear those big petticoats, so I take up 2 seats when I wear my dress. Yeah. So I can't.
That's why you got to fly business.
Oh, good point. My dress doesn't fit.
Yeah. The costs reflected that, that event-based experience. Transatlantic fares were prohibitive for most people. Yeah, definitely. Flying was for executives and diplomats and the wealthy. So into this world arrives the jet engine. And it does not just improve the existing model, it blows the entire frame up and replaces it. The speed, the altitude, the smoothness, the range. Jet engines make flying into a different thing, not just a faster version of the same thing. And the story of how the jet engine arrives in commercial aviation is not a straight line. It goes through a war and a British inventor who could not get anyone to listen to him for most of a decade, and a competition between nations that got genuinely complicated, and a disaster that changed engineering forever.
So let me tell you about Frank Whittle, because Frank Whittle deserves better than the level of name recognition he has outside of aviation circles. Whittle was a Royal Air Force officer who understood the basic theory of the jet engine in 1929, and he patented the concept in 1930. He was 22 years old, and the British government's response to this was, very interesting. No, thank you. Goodbye. He spent the entire 1930s trying to get anyone with money and authority to actually care, and they largely didn't. He finally got private funding in 1936 and had a working engine prototype by 1937. We could have had it by 1930 if somebody would have just given this kid money. The war changes everything, obviously, and suddenly his work gets the resources it needed. And by 1941, the first British jet-powered aircraft flies.
Yeah.
22.
I know.
22. I can't get over that.
I know, that's cool. Well, and it's sad too, but
right? Because you don't listen to 22-year-olds. None of us do.
Yeah. No, of course not. Well, and the way you said that, somebody saying very interesting, like that's a very British way to say, like
Get
go
out.
away. Yeah.
That's lovely.
Yeah. Goodbye. The Germans were doing parallel development independently. Hans von Chain at Heinkel had a working turbojet in 1937 as well. And the first jet-powered flight in history was actually a German aircraft, the Heinkel HE-178, in August of 1939, just before the war started.
And this parallel development is something I find really meaningful about the jet engine story, because we have this cultural habit of wanting a lone genius, one person, one idea, one founder, the cult of the founder, right?
Yes.
Like we really want that. The jet engine doesn't fit into that story. Whittle and von Chain, working independently in different countries with the different resources, arrived at the same engineering concept at essentially the same time, because the physics were understood, the materials were becoming available, and the problem was ready to be solved. It happens in technology more than I think people want to admit. And it happened with the fighter jets. Like, look at a MiG and look at like an F-16. They're essentially the same, except that the MiG, it just cuts off at the front, right? And you think this is what it looks like when you develop two different technologies in two different closed places. Like the US was like top secret stuff, and Soviet Union, top secret stuff. But in the end, they both built essentially the same plane. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I got to say, it was von O'Hain, because my eyes are
O'Hain.
Oh, yeah, not Chain. You and I probably, our eyes are bad enough that you can't, read the name.
I have chronic dry eye, so it's always blurry for me. I don't drive at night anymore.
Yeah, well, it's late enough at night that my eyes are tired now. So
there you go.
Yeah. Anyways, that's what I just keep saying. But the core principle is using combustion to drive a turbine, which drives a compressor, which compresses incoming air, which feeds combustion, and it's a self-sustaining cycle once you get it started.
The war accelerates everything, and then it ends, and suddenly there's jet engines, and the question is, what do you do with this for civilian travel? Because that's what we do with everything. It was that and the peaceful use of the atom. Like, there was such a thing. Like, what do we do with this for civilian travel? And the British answer is, we get there first. The Havilland Comet enters the commercial service in 1952. And this is not a prototype or a proof of concept. This is a real commercial flying aircraft with real paying passengers for BOAC, and they're the predecessor to British Airways. And It's genuinely extraordinary. It flies at around 490 miles an hour. It cruises at 40,000 feet. The cabin's pressurized and comparatively quiet. Passengers who flew the Comet described the experience as transformative. It's nothing like anything they've seen before.
Yeah, it's a cool looking plane too.
It's really Art Deco. Like, that's the thing about the
yeah.
Comet. It looks like it came out of the 1940s.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the de Havilland designs are like that. And like the Vampire is cool too. The design, though, it broke convention. 4 turbojet engines buried inside the wing roots rather than hanging in pods below the wings, which was unusual. The fuselage was designed around pressurization as a primary structural consideration.
And then it just starts falling out of the sky. 3 catastrophic in-flight breakups between 1953 and 1954. Wow. In 1 year, they had 3 catastrophic failures. The entire global Comet fleet is grounded, and what follows is one of the most meticulous and important failure investigations in aviation history. The Royal Aircraft Establishment basically reconstructs the wreckage of one of the crashed aircraft piece by piece in a water tank, because water testing allows them to simulate pressurized cycle without catastrophic results. And they figure out what happened. Have you ever seen that test? So they recorded it, right?
Yeah.
So it's the plane in a tank and the wings are sticking out the side, right? So it's in this tank. And the way they tell the story is the guy who's in charge of figuring out what's wrong, they're going to fill it, which means it's pressurized at 10,000 feet, and they're going to drain it all. And so that's takeoff, cruising, landing, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to do this over and over and over again until they figure out what happens. And the guy's like, and they just started, and they're in this facility. He's going to go take a nap. He's like, I'm going to go back to my room. I'm going to sleep. I'll, wake me up if anything happens. He said he wasn't asleep for more than an hour and a half, and they knocked on the door and said it failed. He's like, it failed. They're like, it was a catastrophic failure. And he was stunned. It was the same day.
Yeah.
So that's crazy, right?
Yeah. Well, and the pattern that was established then, the NTSB and was it the NHTS, whatever, that's when a crash happens, that's what they do is they literally recreate every single piece. They lay it out in a big hangar. Yeah. And they
remember TWA Flight 800?
Yeah.
Like they actually rebuilt that. It was hanging there in that hangar.
Yeah.
That's when they figured out whatever it was blew up from the inside out, the outside in, not the inside out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy.
Yeah. So for the Comet, it was metal fatigue, specifically at the window corners. The Comet had square windows, and the geometry of a square corner creates stress concentration points. Every time the aircraft pressurizes on ascent and then depressurizes on descent, tiny cracks develop at those corners. Over hundreds of cycles, the cracks propagate until the fuselage fails catastrophically and suddenly.
Square windows. So I don't want huge square windows. These were picture windows. Like when you see them on the plane, they look unusually large. I mean, people would sit in front of them and would eat dinner together, and you would look out like you were sitting in front of a cafe and the window is next. It was ridiculous, right? So square windows. The failure mode was invisible to the naked eye. It accumulated over time, and it took 3 aircraft falling out of the air to find it. And I'm not telling the story to be grim. I'm telling it because of what comes next, which is that the entire global aerospace industry absorbs those lessons immediately and permanently. The concept of fail-safe structural design, the systemic study of metal fatigue in pressurized aircraft, the oval windows that you see on every commercial aircraft in the world right now, those are all direct descendants of the Comet investigation. The tragedy made everything that came after it safer, and it ultimately becomes the safest form of travel even today.
That's right. I learned that from Superman. The investigation also changed how aviation authorities worldwide approach certification. The idea that you have to test for failure modes that aren't obvious in normal operation, that you have to think about, a cumulative stress over the life of an aircraft, that becomes embedded in how aircraft are designed and certified everywhere.
Meanwhile, and this is a crucial meanwhile, Boeing is watching all of this very carefully. Boeing had spent the war and the early post-war years building military aircrafts, specifically the B-52 bomber, which, gotta admit, it's a pretty great plane, right?
Yeah.
The company made a decision that it's either visionary or insane, depending on how it goes. They put up their own money, not government money, their own money, to build a prototype jet transport. They called it the 367-80. Everyone calls it the Dash 80. It eventually becomes the 707.
Yeah. Yeah, the investment was approximately $16 million in 1952.
Oof.
So, 16 in 52. That's a lot. And it was roughly equal to Boeing's annual profit at the time. So a whole year. They were
They went
spending it.
all in.
Yeah.
They just pushed all the poker chips in.
Yeah. So they're spending a year's profit, a whole year, on a speculative commercial project with, like, can you imagine that now? Like, there's nobody does that. They don't take the entire year's profit and go, I have an unproven idea. Let's, the speculative. Let's just
do
pour
it.
that in. Yeah. Yeah, no government contractor, airline buyer behind it. Completely speculative. If it had failed, they would have exited commercial aviation entirely.
A genuine bet the company moment. And what I find interesting about it is that Boeing was not the obvious commercial aviation player at that point. Douglas had the DC series. They had the DC-3, had basically invented modern commercial aviation before the war. If you were a smart analyst in 1952 looking at who was going to define the next era of commercial flight, I can say this to you as an analyst, you probably said Douglas. Boeing was the one making the audacious, possibly reckless bet with nothing behind them other than we build the B-52 and it fits 6 people. Right?
I'm glad that the B-52 wasn't like, the aesthetic design that they used to carry into the 700
with that big
series.
bubble at the bottom with the gun in it, just in case.
The 707 incorporated everything the industry had learned from the Comet disasters: oval windows, extensive metal fatigue testing, fail-safe structural design. Boeing had been watching, and they built the lessons in from the start. The aircraft also benefited from Boeing's military jet experience. The 35-degree swept wing, came from the B-47 program. The decision to mount engines and pods slung below the wings rather than buried in the wing roots like the Comet made the engines easier to maintain and allowed each engine to be sized independently of the airframe. Mm-hmm. It also meant that a catastrophic engine failure was less likely to damage the wing structure. The pod-mounted configuration becomes a standard for almost every commercial jet that follows. You still see it on every Boeing and Airbus airliner today.
The 707 enters commercial service with Pan Am in October of 1958, and the jet age is actually properly, irreversibly underway. New York to London in 8 hours. The same route had taken 15 to 18 hours on the propeller aircraft, with a possible stop in Newfoundland. In 8 hours, the world became physically smaller, and it happened in October of 1958.
The 707 flew higher and smooth than anything in commercial service before it, above the weather systems that had made piston air flying so punishing. The ride quality was just completely different.
And the person who understood most clearly that what the 707 meant for the future of air travel was Juan Trippe at Pan Am. Trippe was one of the great visionaries of the 20th century aviation, and also, honestly, one of the great arm twisters. He negotiated the first 707 order with Boeing, and then he used that order to leverage to get a better price, and used the better price as leverage to argue for cutting fares, and used the lower fares to make the argument that he had been making for years, which was flying should not be a luxury activity for executives and the wealthy. Flying should be something ordinary people can afford to do. Trippe was a genuine populist about this in an era where most of the airline industry thought mass market air travel was a slightly ridiculous idea. I have to agree with that. I'm going to agree with that.
I do love the way Alec Baldwin portrays Juan Trippe in The Aviator. It's just great because Alec Baldwin's good in that. But I think Juan Trippe didn't have, I'm not so sure he was so populist about it. I think he just wanted to sell more tickets, but That's just me.
Hey, whatever. Like he was willing to go down market. God bless him.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no, hey, there you go. Pan Am introduced economy class as a real and seriously marketed product. So, it wasn't like first class, economy class, it wasn't the
It
same
was
sort of
all first class.
kind of, yeah, yeah,
Everybody was in first class.
yeah.
Yeah.
Before that, the concept barely existed in commercial aviation. You either flew or you didn't. And if you flew, you paid what it cost.
And I want to pause on that for a moment because I think people have lost track of how recent this is. 1958 is not ancient history. My parents were both alive and adults in 1958. The world in which flying was something that most people simply did not do because they couldn't afford it. It it's within living memory. The jet engine did not just make planes faster. It changed the entire cultural meaning of air travel. It changed who got to be in the air. And that's a bigger deal than the engineering, honestly, right? So it gave world travel to anybody who was brave enough to go, right? That's pretty amazing.
It
That's
is
pretty
amazing.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, here's where it gets weird. Like, it wasn't weird enough. Like, here's where it gets weird. We're in the late 1960s. The 707 is a commercial success. Douglas has the DC-8, which is a competitive aircraft. And there's an actual commercial jet aviation industry now, and it's expanding. And the engineers and the airline executives are all looking at each other asking, all right, so, like, what's next, right? And so two completely opposite answers emerge almost at the exact same time. One answer it is build something bigger. The other answer is build something faster. And the aircraft that came out of those two answers was the 747, which we all ride on still today, which is pretty
Are
amazing,
there
right?
any? I don't know. I think that
747s, yeah, they're still out there.
no, no, because
Yeah,
BA
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
no. I'm not so sure about that. BA just decommissioned the last of them. So,
I'm gonna go look that up.
all right. Well,
All right,
they're still flying for freight, but I don't know about commercial anymore.
I'm gonna go look it up.
There might
And
be a
and
few.
The
Yeah.
Concorde,
No.
right?
Those are
Oh, and we're
definitely not flying.
right. Well, they're building another one. United's
I
building
know.
one, which is
Yeah. Well.
crazy. And they're both magnificent, and the only one of them turns out to be right. And the story of figuring out which one is right takes about 50 years and involves some genuinely painful plot twists.
Yeah. Yeah. The 747 was Juan Trippe again, right? He went back to Boeing and essentially said, I want a plane that carries twice as many people as the 707. I want to move volume and I want to lower the per seat cost. And Boeing's answer was essentially, that aircraft does not exist, but we will build it. And also, it may kill us financially.
Boeing. I think it's Boeing built an entirely new factory in Everett, Washington to assemble the 747 because the aircraft was too large to build in any existing facility. That factory is still the largest building by volume on the planet. They built the largest building in the world to make a plane. The scale of commitment involved in the 747 program is difficult to actually absorb. You know what? And I would say the Dreamliner. The Dreamliner is pretty
Mhm.
crazy in that there's so much AI in the building of one of those. Like, there's all kinds of telemetry data that comes out of the drills even. Like how much torque, and did you put that screw in at the right torque? And if you didn't, you go and you hook this thing, you take your drill back and you hook it up, and then it takes all the data out of it, and then it says, here's everything that wasn't done right. And then you go back and fix it, right? But that's how you know how long it takes to build a Dreamliner? Like the biggest plane Boeing makes, like top to bottom, like start to finish, 6 weeks.
Yeah.
They get that done in 6 weeks, right?
Yeah.
That's how technically advanced the building of the planes are. That's crazy,
It
right?
is. Yeah.
So
It's
anyway,
cool.
they build that, the scale of commitment involved, yeah, it's difficult to absorb for sure,
It's
especially
a
back then.
It's a cool building. I've been up there, at Everett, and the headquarters and factories and stuff. Is a separate story, but they had an issue, let's say, that took down like the 737 production line for 8 hours. That's
Oof.
yeah. If you think about it, okay, if it takes 6 weeks to do a 787, what is the turnaround time on a 737? I think it's shorter than that.
Yeah, right.
And so a day of production is a lot. But anyways, the 747 introduced the wide body cabin, 2 aisles instead of one. which is a bigger passenger experience change than it sounds. It introduced the distinctive upper deck forward section that gave the plane its iconic hump, the big silhouette on the front, and it introduced the high bypass turbofan engine at commercial scale, which is actually the part of the 747 story that matters the most for what aviation becomes afterward.
Yeah, explain the turbofan because it's actually load-bearing for understanding the 747 era, and it's fundamentally different than the 707 era, and also for understanding why the Concorde story ends the way it does. So tell us about the turbofan.
Yeah, okay, so a turbojet pulls air in, compresses it, mixes it with fuel, burns it, and blasts the hot exhaust out the back. All the thrust comes from that hot exhaust. A turbofan adds a large fan at the very front of the engine that moves a much bigger volume of air around the core of the engine itself, not through it. Most of the thrust on a turbofan actually comes from, that bypass air, the air that never went through the combustion chamber at all. This makes the turbofan dramatically more fuel efficient and dramatically quieter than a pure turbojet because you are moving a lot of air at lower velocity rather than little air at high velocity.
And quieter matters because by the early 1970s, the communities around airports are having a very reasonable and very loud conversation about jet noise, and the regulatory pressure to reduce it is building. But more importantly, fuel efficiency matters because 1973 is coming, and the oil crisis is going to change the economic calculus of commercial aviation, and it's going to do it permanently.
We're on this whole transportation kick. We did
With
cars and maps and traffic lights, now planes, and like the 70s is like this really formative era in each one of those stories.
We're going to find out. It was the best 10 years we ever had was the 19th. And I know it was Carter and it was like, the Iran hostages and it was, inflation out of country.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. But we got it was incredible. We got environmental law. We got the EPA. We got the Department of Education. Like that all happened in the 1970s. It's like the greatest era ever.
We got like cool mainframes. We got,
Yeah. It was great.
The 747's JT9D engine was a technological achievement in itself. So Pratt & Whitney had never built a high bypass turbofan at that scale. Have you seen the 747 turbofans? They're big. They're
huge.
Very large. Oh, my favorite thing is to see when they put the turbofans and then they have something behind them on the runway and then they spin them up to, full power and it just blasts,
right.
It flips cars. And,
right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great. Yeah. There were significant development problems with the early engines. The early 747s had these issues that caused real headaches for Boeing and the airlines. The fan blades alone were over 8 feet in diameter, and the engine produced something like 45,000 pounds of thrust, which was unprecedented. The fan blades flexed under thermal stress in ways that the engineers hadn't fully predicted. Engines were ovalizing in flight.
Oh, wow.
This is not a good thing.
Wow.
Right. It causes tip clearance issues and degraded performance. So the thing about tip clearance, like if you're round, something as round as ovalizing and squishing, you're getting tip clearance.
Drag.
Yeah. I don't know if they ever had drag, but because the air has to flow around the fan, on the kind of the outside chamber, if you don't have a gap there, then you've got a problem. So yeah, it's a big issue. So early 747s sat at airports with concrete blocks hanging from their wings because Pan Am didn't have working engines to put on them. They did that to stabilize the wings so they didn't flex and break and stuff. Boeing and Pratt & Whitney had to develop the engine, the airplane, and the manufacturing process for both of those simultaneously on a tight schedule with billions of dollars on the line.
Well, I mean, as you can imagine, the whole program almost collapsed. So Boeing was burning cash. The development schedule was brutal. The engine problems were real. And there was a period in the late 1960s where Boeing's leadership was genuinely uncertain whether the company would survive it. The 747 that everyone loves and that flew for 50 years nearly didn't happen because of the development hell that it was produced in.
Yeah, it did happen, and when it did, it worked. The 747 entered service with Pan Am in January of 1970, and it changed commercial aviation as immediately and completely as the 707 had 12 years earlier.
And simultaneously, while all this 747 drama is happening, the British and the French are building the Concorde.
Yeah. Yeah, the Concorde project began in 1962. Okay. 1962, people. This is a long time
It's
ago,
crazy.
right?
Yeah.
And well, when did when did we say the 707 comes out, right? It's 10 years basically, and the Concorde is out. And it's a joint venture between the British and French. It was a political project as much as an engineering project, and there was, this kind of European pride involved in building something that the Americans had not built.
Ooh. And the Concorde is magnificent. I want to say that with full conviction before I explain all the ways it didn't work commercially, because it deserves its flowers, and I get a little tired of the narrative that just calls it a failure and moves on. The Concorde is one of the most beautiful machines human beings have ever built. It's slender and sharp. It looks like someone was personally offended by the concept of drag, right? Like it looks like a fighter jet, right? It has like the wings are way far back, right? Because that's not the point. It's going so fast because it has such really great engines, right? So it enters commercial service in 1976. 76. At the
I
time, we're
know.
disco dancing. We're
Yeah.
disco dancing. It carries passengers at Mach 2, twice the speed of sound, and it crosses the Atlantic in 3.5 hours. Heathrow to JFK in 3.5. It's a wormhole in 3.5 hours. You can genuinely have breakfast in London and be in New York at time for a second breakfast. You know what I remember? I remember World Aid. Remember that? Remember we were
Yeah.
like, we are the world. Yeah. Okay. So like it was a big deal that what's his name? Phil Collins was going to play in London, get on the Concorde,
Oh, right. Yeah, I remember
come to
that.
New York, and then play the New York live too. And he got there in 3 hours, right? Like that was like such a big deal at the time.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember that.
Can you imagine if that plane was late? People,
Right? People be like, all of a sudden, like Cyndi Lauper's filling in. Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see it.
The engineering required to make sustained supersonic commercial flight work is just it's extraordinary, right? The airframe heats up significantly at Mach 2 from aerodynamic friction, hot enough that the aircraft actually elongates by about 6 inches during the cruise flight from thermal expansion. The nose of the aircraft droops downward on takeoff and landing because the aircraft's angle of attack is so steep that without the droop, pilots cannot see forward of the nose.
No, doesn't the droop cover the windows? I mean, aren't they flying in the dark, essentially?
Well, and I met a guy that he ended up doing some stuff for Callaway Golf, but the same like coating that was on some of the Callaway drivers was the same coating that was on the Concorde.
Oh, no ways. Okay,
Yeah,
so the drooping nose is one of it's my favorite details of the entire history of aviation. The solution not to being able to see past the nose is make the nose movable, right? Just rotate it down.
Yeah.
Solve the visibility problem by rearranging the aircraft. There's a certain we've chosen to go to the moon and do other things, energy to engineering decisions that I find it's just deeply satisfying to me. Like can't see. Oh, we'll point it down. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
Don't even worry about it. We're gonna be good.
The engines were Rolls-Royce Olympus turbojets, not turbofans. You can't efficiently achieve Mach 2 with high bypass turbofans. The bypass architecture that makes turbofans so efficient at subsonic speeds becomes a full liability at supersonic speeds. The Concorde needs the turbojet architecture to go where it was going.
Which means the Concorde is burning fuel at a rate that makes the 747 engineers wince. And which also means the Concorde is loud. Not just the engines, though the engines are extremely loud. I mean, that's like a fighter jet flying over you. It's the same stuff,
loud.
right? But it's the sonic boom. When you're flying faster than sound, you're continuously generating a pressure wave that propagates to the ground as a loud boom. And that boom travels with the aircraft everywhere the Concorde flew supersonically. People knew because they heard the boom. Can I tell you, anytime the shuttle landed in the Mojave, when Sam and I lived in Santa Monica, we lived in that apartment in Santa Monica, anytime the shuttle landed in the Mojave Desert, you'd hear boom, and then all the windows in the apartment would rattle, and then Sam would wake up because it would always be like 5 o'clock in the morning. He'd be like, earthquake, and be like, nope, shuttle's home. Like, that's all it was. It was like, nope, the shuttle's home. Like, that's all it is. But yeah, I can't imagine being on the flight path of the Concorde. Could you imagine? I couldn't imagine.
Well, it was a big deal. I can't remember if I was living in Ontario or my grandmother was still living there, and they had said that they were going to take Concorde flights into Ontario. And, gasp.
Yeah.
And I think there was a big uproar. I don't think it did it more than once, or something. But yeah, the sonic boom problem is what forces the Concorde, onto over ocean routes exclusively. That's it. You can't fly supersonically over populated areas. The United States banned supersonic flight over the continental U.S. entirely.
Well, I'm glad. So you've built the most advanced commercial aircraft in history, and its speed advantage is only relevant over the ocean, which means the routes where the Concorde can actually demonstrate what it does are London to New York, Paris to New York, and like a handful of other places, and that's it. You have a Mach 2 aircraft, and it can profitably fly 2 routes. The economics are always going to be challenging, and the 1973 oil crisis, which hits right in the middle of Concorde's development and early service, makes it all so much worse. Yeah.
Airlines that had placed options to buy Concordes canceled almost all of them after the oil crisis. The aircraft the aircraft that entered service was operated almost entirely by British Airways and Air France, the national carriers of the 2 countries that built it, who essentially had to operate it for reasons of national honor as much as commercial logic.
And they did.
They're small, too. They're small.
Yeah, right? Like, and they did for 27 years. And for 27 years, the people who flew on the Concorde described it as the single best travel experience they ever had. Well, yeah, it's like a private jet that goes Mach 2. Like, why wouldn't it be great? You probably paid $6,000 to be on it. And there's a Concorde passenger community unlike any other aviation community. They are not nostalgic. They're grieving. There is a real and ongoing sorrow in that community about the retirement of the aircraft in 2003 that, you know what, I find it genuinely moving because it speaks to something real about what that aircraft meant to the very rich people who could experience it. I feel bad for them. I do.
Yeah. But yes, so the more serious note, right? The Air France crash in 2003 accelerated the retirement of the Concorde. A burst tire caused debris to strike a fuel tank on takeoff from Paris, and 113 people died. The fleet was grounded for over a year. Modifications were extensive. Kevlar liners were installed inside the fuel tanks. The tires were redesigned to fragment less catastrophically when they burst. The electric wiring was rerouted away from the fuel tanks.
Mm-hmm.
The Concorde returned to commercial service in November of 2001. November of 2001, folks.
Oh, yeah.
2 months after the September, 2 months after the September 11th attacks devastated the business travel market that the aircraft depended on. So Air France and British Airways flew it for another 2 years, but the post 9/11 collapse and rising fuel costs made the economics just, untenable. The aircraft was retired permanently in October of 2003.
Oh, I don't want to call it a failure. Like, Concorde flew for 27 years. It never had another fatal accident after 2000. It changed the culture of transatlantic business travel, and the engineers who built it were doing something at the absolute boundary of what's possible with technology of the 1960s. I mean, think about that. Like, we couldn't microwave a potato, but we were doing this stuff, right? Like, that drives me crazy. Working with the slide rules and the paper calculations, figuring out, sustained Mach 2 commercial flight, from first principles, calling that a failure because it didn't generate a profit it's just a wrong metric to something that was never only about profit. And you know what else? I blame all this private jet crap on the fact that we don't have one of those now. Like, Bieber would be on the Concorde instead of on his own stupid plane. Right? You know that if Kelsey Travis Kelce had to get to see Tay in Japan, he'd go on the Concorde instead of taking her plane. Like, they do that stuff. Like, it's just better for the environment, I think, if we just got it back and let the uber rich use it. What do you think?
Well, I don't know. I mean, less air travel is always better for the environment, but yeah, I don't know the math on the Concorde to know, because the private jets, they do run turbofans, but yeah, they're super bad. Well, and somebody like Taylor Swift has 2 or 3, so you should see the maps that they have. That Taylor's going this way, Travis is going that way,
Right?
then they come together, then they go apart again. And then then another plane comes to pick them up, and then they go back.
Yeah,
And,
or her mom needs to go somewhere, so he comes to get her and takes her back to Nashville.
Really?
Yeah.
Whatever. So the knowledge generated by the Concorde program about aerodynamics, materials behavior, that special paint that goes on the Callaway drivers, materials behavior at sustained high temperatures, high altitude atmospheric science, fed into aerospace engineering, broadly for decades.
And now, while the 747 and the Concorde are both in the air and everybody is figuring out what commercial aviation looks like, something happens that is arguably more consequential for the everyday experience of flying than any aircraft, a law, the Airline Deregulation Act of 1978.
Yeah. Before deregulation, the Civil Aeronautics Board controlled what routes airlines could fly, which airlines could fly them, and what fares they could charge. The result was the airlines competed almost entirely on service quality rather than price, because price was effectively fixed by regulation.
I want that back. You got real food and coach. You actually got legroom. You got a checked bag included within a fare because, of course, you did. And the experience of flying in 1975 versus the experience of flying in 1995 are not comparable. Deregulation said, let the market determine the routes, let the market determine the fares, let the competition sort it out. And I have complicated feelings about what happened next. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Fares dropped significantly. Air travel became accessible to a much larger portion of the population, and passenger numbers increased dramatically. I was able to fly as a kid because of this. I flew a few years after, deregulation. So, yeah.
Yeah, so Tripp's dream comes true in a way. Flying stops being a luxury activity. Ordinary people can afford to fly with all their kids. And also, like, I want Disney to have its own airline. It could save me so much grief flying in and out of Orlando.
Okay, right. So there's a great YouTube channel called, what is it, the Mouselets, I think. And one of the ladies that's on there is a civil engineer. And so she does all this stuff about the civil engineering of Disney, and it goes back to annual reports and county records and all sorts of crazy stuff. And Disney had an airport, still does have, a kind of a quasi airport down there in Orlando. And that was kind of, they had a strategy around getting people to Disney, and they would have had an airline. They would have had an airline.
I want them to use it. I want them to. I wish I knew how to run an airline. I'd run a Disney airline. If you like, I would license it and run it. Okay. Ordinary people can afford to fly, and also the experience of doing it becomes something that I, a person who's been flying since 1979, thank you, recognize as a systemic removal of anything that made it pleasant. Oh, because I fly Frontier too, which is taking even more away that makes it even remotely pleasant. Like, those seats are hard. I don't think those are cushions. Both of those things are true simultaneously, and I do not think you get to pick one and ignore the other.
Yeah. Man, Frontier was so much better before the bankruptcy buyout. So,
yeah, when it turned in. Okay, but it is one of those want to go to Columbus from Ontario, it's $49. Like, that's the crap that kills you. Like, how are they doing that? How are they doing that?
I mean, living in Denver, that was great because, it was an alternative to United, Southwest. But and Southwest and that. So the hub and spoke routing model is also a consequence of deregulation. Airlines concentrate passengers at major hub airports and then route them through those hubs to reach destinations like FedEx packages, rather than operating direct point-to-point service.
hub and spoke. It's like my nemesis. It's the region I spend genuinely a significant portion of my adult life in Phoenix because there's not a place I go where I have to go through Phoenix or Vegas. Either one it's 45 minutes from home. Like, why did we have to stop? Like, I don't understand. And I get Palm Springs International is, lame, but still. Anyway, I want to say clearly it's not done anything to deserve the amount of time I spend there. It's not like Phoenix Airport isn't a hootenanny. It's Phoenix. It does have good restaurants. It's not good restaurants. It just has some. It has a Burger King. I guess it's good enough. It just sits at the geographic center of the Southwest map, right? Like if you're going to fly Southwest, you're definitely going to Phoenix. And if you want to go anywhere in the Southeast United States from somewhere else, it's waiting for you patiently. Yeah, with a Bojangles.
There's a Chili's, right? I mean, is there Arizona? It's a Chili's or something.
So there's
some crappy Tex-Mex place.
There's a crappy Tex-Mex place. It's a sit-down restaurant. It has like a Burger King. It has a Jersey Mike's. It might have like a Panda Express. I know. Here's the thing: I fly in and out of airports based on what I can eat while I'm there. Right, like Seattle. Like Seattle doesn't have a whole lot. It's kind of like Denver's really good. Denver is really good though.
Denver is good. I love Denver Airport. I mean, it was my second home, and the kids are funny because like this summer we're going to go back to the States, and when you go, it's when you go in that direction, we usually end up in Dallas or O'Hare before we go down to Arkansas, and the kids were like, "Oh, O'Hare, ooh, there's no good food in O'Hare, at least in the terminals that we landed, right?"
Okay, the terminals you hang out in.
Yeah, and then because you got to go to the G terminal, which is the little crappy commuter terminal, right? And then Dallas, they're like, "Oh yeah, we like the Dallas airport because there's a Mexican place that's really good in the Dallas airport."
Austin has good food in its airport. Some of it might even be like famous food.
Austin's good.
Airport.
Austin's good.
Yeah,
I'm with you though. And Phoenix is low rent. Phoenix is
yes.
No.
You know what? Just one more thing about the Las Vegas terminal for Frontier. It's off the hook. It's like brand new. It's off the hook. Like if I was going to fly through anywhere and I was on Frontier, like I'd be like, drop me off in Vegas for 3 hours. I'll just hang out at the terminal. It's that good. Yeah.
Last time I was in Phoenix, it was, I don't even know how long ago it was. I try to avoid the place, but it was. I not to offend our 3 listeners in Phoenix probably, but that's about the airport, right? And man, that place needed carpet bad. That place needed new carpet, new flooring bad. Like, just strip out the carpet, people. Put in like tile. I don't care, tile something.
Yeah, because I don't have to drag my suitcase so hard, right? Like,
yeah. Anyways,
all right. So where does this all leave us? And what does the history of passenger jet technology actually mean for the world we live in now? Let's start with the most obvious thing, which is what happened to the airlines themselves. The 747 flew commercially for 50 years before Boeing ended production in 2022. 50 years. The aircraft that entered service in 1970 was still being manufactured in 2022. Think about what that says about how good the fundamental design was and how much runway the basic concept had.
Runway. The 747 went through multiple significant variants over those 50 years. The original, the Dash 100, then the 200, the 300, the 400, and then finally the 8. Each generation improved the engines, upgraded the avionics, increased the range, little canards, the little flips on the end of the wings, right?
Yep.
Right. They improved, fuel efficiency and all of that. The 400, which was the version most people were flying in the 80s, the 90s, 2000s, was something like 30% more fuel efficient per seat than the original 747-100.
The aircraft that came after the 747 in the bigger is better lineage is the Airbus A380. You ever been on an A380? This is crazy.
Yeah.
Those are crazy.
I have mixed feelings about the 380. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's meant to fit a lot of people. Like a lot of people, which Airbus built on the same theory Trippe had been working with since the late 1960s. Put more people on one plane, spread the fixed costs, lower the ticket price. The A380 is 2 full decks the entire length of the aircraft, which sounds impossible until you see one, and it still kind of sounds impossible. It's the largest commercial passenger aircraft ever built, and it's okay. Genuinely, like, two things interesting. So first of all, LAX had to expand one runway to make it long enough for it to land and take off. And every Thursday, so I lived 5 minutes from LAX. Like, no kidding. Like, you couldn't see the runway from where I lived. I was on the backside of a hill. And I would hear the airport just as loud as I would hear the 10. So it was, it wasn't that big a deal. But you could watch the planes just line up on the horizon and come in, and you really wouldn't hear them. When that thing landed, when the A380 landed, it shook the house, and it shook it every day, every Thursday at 11 o'clock. I think it was coming from Japan. Like, that thing would shake the house. It was that big and noisy. It was crazy.
Big
crazy.
Plane.
But it was, the other thing that was crazy about it is when it got in the air, after it took off and it got to cruising altitude, the wings would get bigger, and then they would bow like a bird. Right?
Yeah.
And like, you're watching it happen thinking, we're all going to die. We're going to die. Like, why is this wing moving? Why is it making that weird shape? Oh my God, what is happening? Right? And then you realize, oh, well, it's more efficient. It's more aerodynamic, right? You seriously look like a seagull. Like, it's really weird.
Well, that's, plane. The way the flaps and the control surfaces and stuff move. I mean, it changes the shape of the wing. It's really cool.
It's crazy.
Emirates, which, if you haven't flown Emirates, you need to fly Emirates. It's a good...
Yeah, I haven't done it yet.
Yeah. So Emirates puts a shower in first class on the A380, a functioning shower at 40,000 feet, available to first class passengers on certain long-haul routes.
A shower on a plane. Yeah, it's funny. And I completely understand the impulse behind it, because the impulse is, what if there was no limit? Like, what if we could just keep asking, what if the plane, but more? Like, it's a plane. Yeah, but it could be more. I'm never going to be in that shower. That shower is not for me. I mean, I can't say it's not for anybody I know. Maybe somebody I know could use it. But I mean, it's for Jennifer Aniston, clearly. It's not for Renee Murphy. But glad someone is in the shower, because it means people who built it refuse to stop asking the question, like, what else can we put in this thing?
Yeah. Unfortunately, though, the A380 did not work commercially, which is, sort of a painful echo of the Concorde story. Airbus ended production in 2019 after only about 250 aircraft were built. The economics required very high passenger loads on very high density routes, and airlines found that 2 smaller, more fuel-efficient aircraft could serve the same routes with more scheduling flexibility and lower risk.
Which brings us to the direction aviation actually went, and which I think represents the most interesting design story in recent aviation history. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner and the Airbus A350. These are smaller wide-body aircraft, roughly twin-aisle, medium to large capacity, and they're built from materials that are genuinely novel in commercial aviation.
Okay, I love the 787.
I do too. I do. I love the Dreamliner. Yeah, I do.
It's
a pretty plane.
It's a pretty plane. It's comfortable. It's the Dreamliner.
Right. And well, you tap the windows to shade them. Like, there's just
except most of the time they lock you out of that functionality. That makes me it makes me mad. Yeah, the 787 fuselage is primarily carbon fiber reinforced polymer composite rather than aluminum. About 50% of the aircraft weight is composite material. This changes a lot of things. Okay, so also, like, all right, we say carbon fiber, like, and we think, oh, composite materials, and it's lighter and it's great. But the amount of work that had to go in, you're talking about decades of aerospace engineering that was built around aluminum aircraft frames. Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden you're talking about carbon fiber. It's completely different. And the amount of time it took to get to the point, from 1950 whatever and the 707 to the first iterations of the Dreamliner, that the timeline from idea to delivery on the Dreamliner, you're talking years, not decades, and it's mind blowing. Anyways, the airframe is lighter, it improves fuel efficiency. Carbon fiber doesn't fatigue the same way aluminum does. Does fatigue though, which is
Yeah, we learned
implication.
that from that stupid submarine.
Yeah, well, yeah. Implications for maintenance and service life, right? Critically, composite fuselages can be built to tolerances that allow for higher cabin pressure, and this is like my favorite feature of the 87.
Well, it's one of those things that sounds boring until you realize that it's the actual explanation for why flying on a 787 feels
just
physically different from flying on an older aircraft. The 787
so
maintains a cabin altitude equivalent to about 6,000 feet above sea level. Now, usually, right, older aircraft maintain cabin altitude around 8 to 10,000 feet, right? That's why you feel so beat up by the time you go somewhere. You're 10,000 feet for that whole time. Doesn't sound like a big difference until you think about what lower altitude does to your body. Less fatigue, less dehydration, less ear pressure, a less of that particular feeling of arriving somewhere and needing 3 days to feel like yourself again.
Yeah. My favorite route is the London to Houston because it's about 10-ish hours. And so it gives you just enough time to scarf something down at the beginning and then tell them to leave you alone, for the whole flight.
Right.
You get your sleep in, and then of course you fly business, and then you're laying down and all of that, and then you wake up and you can grab a snack for breakfast. So the humidity is higher in the 787, which makes so much better. You can breathe. You can actually sleep because you can breathe.
Right.
The older metal fuselages couldn't support without corrosion risk. So, the composite structure doesn't have that problem. So they can run higher humidity. Although I did get into a 787 once and it was a little swampy. I'll just say that.
Oh,
yeah. It was flying. It was flying through all the southeast of the U.S. or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. But that dryness issue, helps that on the long flights. So
I've flown transatlantic on both a 787 and the older 777s, and the difference in how I feel when I land, it's real and it's noticeable. And you know what?
Yep.
They're paying attention to your sleep cycle too, your circadian rhythm, because they'll eventually put the cabin through like the sun setting and then twilight, and then it's dark, and then the sun's coming up, it's twilight, then it's orange again, and then you're awake. You're like, oh my gosh, like they really, I love that. It's like, because I am really circadian rhythm like hook. So it's so good. Anyway, the best improvement to the passenger experience in recent aviation history is not the screens on the back of the seats. It is cabin pressure and composite materials. It's invisible engineering that you can only perceive by noticing that you feel less terrible than you expected to. So thank you, Boeing engineers, for making me feel less terrible than I expected to.
Well, my brother and I, you've ever heard that saying? If it's not Boeing, I'm not going.
I ain't going. Yeah.
Right. So, safety improvement is the other major story of the modern aviation era, and I think it's even more important than cabin pressure, humidity. Right, the fatality rate per billion passenger miles in commercial aviation has dropped by something like 95% since the early jet age. Flying commercially is now statistically one of the safest activities a human being can engage in. You're substantially more likely to be hurt driving to the airport than flying in the aircraft.
So I think the actual statistic is you could randomly board a plane 365 days a year, and it would be 25 years before you were involved in a crash, and even then the odds are you'd survive. Like, that's crazy. I could randomly board a plane every single day, and it would take 25 years before I was involved in anything. That's nuts. So if you're out there and you've been in a plane crash, let me know. I want to fly with you, because the odds of it happening to you twice are astronomical. So call me. I want to fly where you fly. And that's an improvement, and it's not magic. It's the accumulated result of every crash investigation, every regulatory change, every design improvement, every near miss that got analyzed and learned from. The Comet disasters taught the world about metal fatigue and fail-safe design. The crash investigators of the 1970s and 80s taught the world about crew resource management, which is the practice of making sure the first officer can actually push back on the captain, because it turns out a lot of accidents happen because the first officer knows something is wrong, but it's too intimidated to say anything about it.
Yeah, that's a good improvement. The
Right?
development, the development of flight data recorders, the black box, which is actually orange or red. Flight data recorders and cockpit voice recorders meant that accidents could be reconstructed with a level of detail that wasn't previously possible, and that knowledge fed back into the design and training.
And so every time something goes wrong in aviation, and things still do go wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, there's that Malaysia flight we still haven't found. We still don't know where that thing is. That is the culture of safety that commercial aviation built over 70 years. It is not innate. It was constructed. It was constructed from failures and the willingness to look at failures honestly and change things because of what you found. And you know what? I swear to God, if we did that in IT for 10 minutes, like really meant it, like post, incident review, and instead of taking it personally, we took it seriously, imagine how good we would be at stuff instead of still letting the AI agents
and then actually
lead our
fixing the stuff,
and then fixing it.
Yeah.
Forever. Not just patching it, fixing it forever. Yeah.
Stupid, I'm going to go off on a tangent here for a second. Stupid batch files and file systems and file management basics. Like, I was at a place, not going to name names, they couldn't get it right. And it's like, you do the post-incident and it's like, these are the problems. And you go, okay, well, let's fix this. And, oh, well, that's going to be this much time. And, that's going to be this. And, well, we can fit it in next quarter. And you're like, you know what? If this were a plane, that fleet wouldn't be flying until the issue was fixed. Like,
my favorite was we had a time clock system that on the day payroll needed it, because everybody would be putting in their time all at once because we're all lazy jerks. And so the day that they needed to run payroll would be the day it crashed. And so like I'm on year 2 of this job, and I'm like, okay, seriously, like we need to fix this. Or like, we did fix it. You just reboot it. And it's like, that's not fixing it.
No.
It's not fixing it. Like, can we please get me Microsoft? Something's wrong. You know what was wrong? Front page extensions. Just uninstall them.
Well, there you go. Yeah. I mean, but like if we actually did that in a core banking system, it's like no new code shows up until we fix this. And it's just like,
we don't live like that in the real world. We have a lot to learn from Boeing, right? That's what I'll say. They can teach us to be better engineers for sure.
Yeah. Like the accident rate though in commercial aviation is not zero. The Boeing 737 Max crashes. Okay, there you go. Software. The 737 Max crashes in 2018 and 2019. Real serious reminder that the economic and regulatory pressures on aviation never fully disappear. So they built that whole thing as a regulatory thing that said, oh, well, it'll fly the same and it won't require retraining, because the retrain issue with pilots is huge. It's massive to retrain pilots.
Well, I mean, if they're retraining, they're not flying. And if they're not flying, no one's making money, right?
Yeah.
And so to everyone you train, you're just losing money on. So and they go to Boeing and they like the airlines go to Boeing and say, we'll buy another plane from you, but we're not doing training. So it's up to Boeing to figure out how to build a brand new plane and not have anybody go to training. It was a real conundrum, I think, in the end. Yeah.
Those crashes and the investigation that followed raised, questions about how certification process had allowed a safety critical design change to go through without adequate review and without telling the pilots about it.
I know, right? To have the plane, I guess this is the thing. The software would think that plane in particular would stall, and so it would pull the nose up. But the pilot didn't want the nose up, so they would fight to bring it back down, right? And so they couldn't figure out what was going on with it. Is it the flaps? Is it the hydraulics? Like, what the hell's going on? Because they didn't know that software was in there. And I think and I remember they were trying to, when they grounded it all, remember they grounded them all and they were like, everybody's trying to get their planes back to their hub. And I remember pilots being like, I'm not getting on that thing. And I remember the pilot association, the union for the pilots being like, when you have a brand new Boeing plane that a pilot doesn't want to fly, you got a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
And that was the day it became, if it's Boeing, I ain't going. Right. Like that was the day it all fell apart for Boeing, which was sad.
Yeah.
That's sad. You know what? And the story's part of the legacy too. The fact that aviation has a culture of safety does not mean that the culture is impervious to pressure. I mean, Boeing was getting the pressure from McDonnell Douglas, who bought them. They were the ones who said, you think too much about this stuff and we're going to move on and we're leaving. We're going to Chicago. You guys all stay here and build what we tell you to build and do it in the time we tell you to do it and spend what we tell you to spend. And that's really crazy. So, it has to be actively defended. The 737 MAX story is not a story about aviation failing to be safe. It is a story about what happens when the institutional pressures that have always existed in commercial aviation push hard enough against the right places. The culture of safety, it's not self-maintaining, right? It requires maintenance. And I think the Boeing people wanted to do the right thing. I think the McDonnell Douglas people wanted to make money. There, Renee said it.
There you go. Well, I think that came out in the discussions, right, in Congress, the hearings. I mean, that was clear. And what was frustrating for me is to see some of the products that came out of Washington, like particularly like the 787, which was manufactured in Charlotte or on the East Coast somewhere. And, 787 has a good safety record, but then them finding issues during production on multiple planes and airframes.
Oh, when they found the ladder in the tail.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like a whole ladder was in the tail fin and if that thing fell onto the hydraulic or any of those mechanisms back there, they would have crashed. Like there was some crazy stuff going on for sure.
So it's just really disappointing. And I think, it's good to see the kind of the corporate culture shifting again, which I think is good. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what a great company. And it would be sad to think that just because people were being lazy that happened. Okay, so my closing thought about what that 11-year-old on the 727, which is where we started. She did not know she was sitting on a machine, the product of 30 years of the most intense sustained engineering acceleration in human history. She didn't know about Frank Whittle or the Comet or Juan Trippe's genuinely radical populism or the bet the company decision that Boeing. I didn't know any of it. She knew the math didn't work and that it was happening anyway. And I've spent decades since learning all of it, the full history, the technical layers, the failures that made the successes possible. And I feel the same thing when the wheels leave the ground. That it's like that disbelief, that sense that, they got away with it again. They keep getting away with it. I think that's a feeling that's actually the right one. Wonder first, explanation later, wonder again after you understand the explanation. Like for me, like that's the right sequence, right? Like I see the stars. My God, I learned that they're probably dead by now. Wow. And I'm still like, wow, right? So yeah, that is the right. I love wonder, but I also love knowing about things. So like that's the perfect thing for me, for sure.
I think it's, kind of I don't know, just an admiration of engineering for me. So, there's the Concorde on display at the Intrepid Sea Air and Space Museum in New York, right? I've seen that one. That's great. The fact that it can fit onto the aircraft carrier, it's kind of
it all.
I stood to actually, some time ago, last time was the last time I was in New York? No, maybe a couple of times. It's not, it's not huge, right? It's narrow, it's sharp, and it looks like it was designed by someone with that, personal grievance against air resistance. And I kept thinking about the engineers who designed it, in the 60s with slide rules and paper calculations. I'm not going to say they didn't have any computers, but, not the way that we understand them today, right? They were figuring out how to sustain Mach 2 commercial flight from first principles, with hand calculations, and they got it right. The nose droops, like... Think about the complexity of the whole front end, moving and stuff. Like simple, like moving parts equals complexity, right?
Right. It's just one more
Right.
thing that can fail.
Exactly, right. The fuselage elongates, 6 inches. It's like on the SR-71. I don't know if you ever seen one of those on the ground. The thing leaks like a sieve, right? Because as it gets up and it gets to altitude and gets to speed, it heats up and everything closes up.
Oh,
you know,
okay. Yeah.
right? So
Okay.
it's designed, to be on the ground and leak because if you built it so it was tight on the ground, it would blow up,
Right.
yeah. So
That's crazy.
yeah, and the same thing. That thing was, designed in the in the 50s and 60s. So that aircraft that heats to 127 degrees Celsius at the leading edges, and they predicted all of that. What would happen on paper with slide rules. I don't know how you build something like that without loving the problem to a degree that probably isn't healthy or sustainable, right? But that love, that, completely unreasonable commitment to figuring out the hardest version of the thing is just everywhere in the history of aviation. And, that's why any of it works at all.
An unhealthy love of the hardest version of the problem. I think you accidentally described both aviation history and this podcast, honestly.
I think that's probably a common theme for us. Yeah.
Okay, nostalgic nerds, thank you for spending time with us inside a glorified aluminum tube with very good cabin pressure.
Yeah. Carbon fiber composite tube, if you're on the 787.
A glorified carbon fiber composite tube with very good cabin pressure and somewhere in first class, a shower that neither of us will ever be in. We'll be back next week. Well, maybe Mark will. I know I won't. I mean, my gosh, I would be worried about catching something on my feet. It would be a whole thing. We'll be back next week with something new. In the meantime, stay curious, stay weird. And if you're connecting through Charlotte Douglas or Phoenix, yeah, we'll see you. We feel you. And, stop at the Jersey Mikes. They're expensive, but they're good, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Find us wherever you get your podcasts. A review. If you loved it, leave us a review. If you hated it, Renee responds to all of them, personally. She doesn't,
Yeah,
but
I
I
do.
just like to say that. Yeah. And, we'll hear, we should mention merch. If you go to the website,
Merch
nostalgic.
drop. We had a merch drop.
Yeah. Go to the website, and I'll put it in the show notes, nostalgicnerdspodcast.com, and up at the top banner it says shop, and you can click and you can get some, merch. There you go.
Right on. So go get your hoodie or your mug or your hat. We'd appreciate it. So thanks to everyone who calls this show aggressively educational. You know who you are. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Tune in again. Thanks, Mark.
All right, thanks.
Squeeze myself in. Man in sea wouldn't lift his knee. No, that man in sea won't lift that knee. Woman in A pulled the shade down. Didn't wanna see. I'm in 23B. Just B. The window went to A. Eyes went to C. I got what was left. I'm in 23B. Just B. Baby's been crying since we left the gate. Lord, that baby's been crying since we left the gate. Smell of perfume keeps me wondering what I ate. Bare feet on the headrest, 3 rows in front of me. Bare feet on the headrest, 3 rows in front of me. Wanted 40 minutes of quiet, can't get 40 seconds free. I'm in 23B. Just B. A window went to A, eyes went to C. I got what was left. I'm in 23B. Just B. There used to be a dinner. There used to be a time. There used to be a meeting to getting in the sky. Now I'm boarding group 5. to end.